Hello, everybody. This is 3SP, and I'm coming to you with another update. And today I'm actually coming from a post from today that was posted by Dr. Ben Carson. He said, regarding all of the racial and political strife emanating from the events in Charlottesville last weekend, let me relate a story. Several years ago, we bought a farm in rural Maryland. One of the neighbors immediately put up a Confederate flag. A friend of ours who was an African American three-star general was coming to visit and immediately turned around, concluding that he was in the wrong place. Interestingly, all the other neighbors immediately put up American flags, shaming the other neighbor who took down the Confederate flag. More recently, our home in Virginia, along with that of a neighbor, was vandalized by people who also wrote hateful rhetoric about President Trump. We were out of town, but other kind, embarrassing neighbors cleaned up most of the mess before we returned. In both instances, less than kind behavior was met by people taking the high road. We could all learn from these examples. Hatred and bigotry, unfortunately, still exists in our country, and we must all continue to fight it. But let's use the right tools. By the way, that neighbor who put up the Confederate flag subsequently became friendly. That is the likely outcome if we just learn to be neighborly and to get to know each other. All right. And I appreciate Dr. Ben Carson. If you remember, he was one of the GOP candidates for who was trying to become the Republican presidential candidate. He's a black gentleman and a conservative. But he was met with a lot of hatred, mainly by the African American community on social media and also on mainstream media. They were calling this man a clown. They were calling him retarded. Just different insults and things, mainly insulting his intelligence. But the thing about Dr. Ben Carson is he's one of the world's top neurosurgeons, and he was the only neurosurgeon of his time to successfully separate conjoined twins that were conjoined at the head, sharing brain tissue and arteries. He was able to separate them and have both of them survive. At the time, he was the only man in history to do that. And yet to call this gentleman a idiot, a clown, retarded, and all these other insulting things really just shows the intelligence of the people making these claims. Now, Dr. Ben Carson is one of the sweetest, kindest people I've ever seen before, and I really admire him. And I'm really glad that he's putting things out like this for an example. But I wish more mainstream people would come out with what's really going on with the Antifa and all that. And like I said on a previous post, I do not support white nationalism. I don't support the KKK or Nazism or any form of racial identity politics because they're all hate groups. Now, and another thing is that we have to recognize is that Antifa and subsequent groups that were there even in Charlottesville are communist movements. They hold up the communist flag. They spew out communist rhetoric. And there's a scary thing with that happening right now. I'll pull up another article later about the other sides of that. But communism is the worst thing that could happen to almost any country. We've seen what it did to China with Mao Zedong, who was the communist revolutionary in China, who killed anywhere between 100 million to 300 million of his own people. That is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous amount of people. Or the 80 million that were killed in Russia during their communist revolution. And so they always talk about Nazism and how bad that is. Nazism is a socialist leftist movement. Both communism and socialism are both Marxist ideologies that exist on the left, because they both believe in distributing wealth, letting government be in control of the wealth distribution to determine how much a person can have, what property they can own. Well, socialism will determine what property you can own. Communism don't believe in you owning property, period, that the government owns it all and controls it all. And in both socialist countries and communist countries, they, for one, have to come into power by killing all opposition. So when a socialist or communist dictator comes into power, after they come into power, they kill all the dissent. Anyone who's spoken against the ideology, they're coming for you. You're going to die. And basically, that's why they're labeling anyone now who don't lean left or who's more conservative. They're calling you all alt-right. They're calling you all white supremacists or nationalists, or all these different terms that they're labeling you, so that when they come into power, they're going to kill you if this communist uprising takes place. Now, there's actually, I want to go over a comment I seen on here. I'm not going to try to say the gentleman's last name, but his name's Bob. This is what the communists did when they came to power in my country, South Vietnam, in 1975. First, they destroy all the statues of our national heroes. Then they changed the names of streets so that all the street names for patriots were now named for traitors. Then they took away everybody's house and said it belongs to the government. If you had a car or a piano or an air conditioner, they took that too, because they said you are not allowed to be richer than other people. And the communists put all those things in their own houses. Then they put in prison everybody who told the truth about communists, and most of those people we never saw again. Then they changed the textbooks so the children didn't know the history of their country, and they think communism is their savior. From 1975 to 1990, my country got poorer and poorer. And in 2000, we finally got back to the same level as 1970. Watch out, Americans. Learn from the history. Now they come for you too. This is scary, and we all have to be aware of this. You see it happening in the colleges. Anytime anyone's talking about anything politically right, or not even politically right, if they're conservatives, if they're Republicans, if they're libertarians, just them being right-leaning, they get shut down by you could call them social justice warriors, you could call them anything you want to, but they'll come in, they'll start yelling in the classroom or start yelling in the auditorium, they'll start yelling safe and shame no matter what you're talking about. Then they'll hold up red flags. This is what we're dealing with now. Then again, with the violence that we see, they don't debate, they don't talk with you. Then once they get into power, they kill you. This is something we really have to look out for. Jody McCoy responded to Bob and said, Sam Abdullah, iconicalism. Feel free to look it up. It is both the tactic and declaration of war used by socialists and Muslims. If you think this is about racism, you are wrong. I could care less about Confederate statues, and if I knew for sure that tearing them down would guarantee racial harmony, I would do it myself. However, This is a battle of ideology clothed with racial tension. Socialists have been using such tactics for roughly a century. Muslims much longer. Don't be surprised when they start tearing down statues of Washington, Lincoln, Franklin, and Jefferson. This is the warning we have from, again, Jody McCoy, which I think is a very profound warning, because socialism, communism, just Marxism, period, is just a little bit over 100 years old. And every country that has tried to go the route of socialist or communist have seen countless amounts of death, starvation, and oppression. And one argument you'll hear for someone who supports socialism or communism or any form of Marxism, they'll say, but far more people have died under capitalism. And I guess the argument they might be talking about is war. Under capitalism, we're not being murdered in our own country by our own government. I know there could be a lot of arguments about that, but it does not compare. Like, we're not starving to death as a nation. And if you really want to admit it, we do have a certain level of socialism. So there's a level of socialism for the people that haven't achieved to a certain level to recognize capitalist goals. Like people who make minimum wage, most likely you can also qualify for like food stamps, energy assistance, Medicare, Medicaid. These things are true, and that's actually written into the law. That's one thing that Walmart and McDonald's tells you why they pay you so low, is because you could get these government assistance programs. I know it sounds terrible. I wouldn't work for either one of those companies. I don't get paid a lot right now, but I just get paid a little bit over the threshold not to get government assistance. When I was getting paid lower, me and my wife were on government assistance, and it still wasn't enough. The best thing to do is to come up with a plan. You have to make yourself valuable to be able to reach a level of income. And most people that want to argue against that is because they don't want to work hard enough to make it to a higher level. If any country that's become communist or socialist, nobody's rich. Everybody is dirt poor, hungry, and oppressed, except the top leaders in government. They are all extremely wealthy and extremely comfortable, and they love their power. So take these warnings from people from countries that have been through it. Look at your communist countries now. Cuba, they still live in the 50s, and anything that most Cubans need, they learned how to build themselves from broken electronics. China in the last 15 years finally started letting a certain level of controlled capitalism into their country, and it's created a ton of billionaires from people who have originally been oppressed, but they still have some of the lowest minimum wage in the world, and they still have people that work 12 hours or more a day and live in alleys. And if they don't live in alleys, they live on campus of these slave factories. But then you have multi-billionaire factory owners, who most of them are either government people, military people, or relatives of government and military people. North Korea is a communist country. They're not allowed anything, and they are currently starving. Venezuela is a socialist country, and their whole economy is based off of oil. But the thing is, your income is basically determined by the government. So when oil prices went down, their people started starving. Their economy started crashing. At least in a capitalist country, you can go toward your own ideas to try to build wealth. We're not just based off of one thing or what the government says we can do. Now, regulation has been impeding small businesses from even starting. But again, with a lot of regulation cuts, now we're seeing a boom in the stock market, the value of the dollar, and now jobs being available. That is the benefits of a capitalist country or a free market system, is that you could put your money where your values are. You could put your money on what you want, and it drives innovation. It drives success. It drives people to reach whatever level that they're ambitious enough to take. If you have no ambition, you're going to get paid lower. If you have high ambitions, you can work yourself to the top. Most of our billionaires, a lot of our billionaires didn't finish college, but they were ambitious enough, or they had an idea that they get paid lots of money for. In a communist country, there's no reason to come up with great ideas because you won't get paid for them. Your government will take the rights, the copyrights and all of that of whatever idea you have. So there's not much more I could say about this. So we just need to pray, because we're really one of the last Christian countries, and it's really hard to call us a Christian country anymore because there's so many non-Christians now, which that's fine, but we're one of the last countries that protect Christian values, and it is our job to pray to keep that, because I agree with certain preachers that say you get the type of government that you deserve. We have to fight and pray to keep the type of government and the type of values that we have, or we'll all be demonized. We'll all be basically destroyed, killed by this demonic entity that's starting to rise up in the world. I'm going to leave you with that. This is 3SP signing out.